This clarifies, and he goes on to clarify that Rustin was not opposed to race consciousness in public policy. He was opposed to quotas, which he viewed as undemocratic, but he was not opposed to race consciousness.
This is the guy who ghost wrote for MLK, by the way. There are any number of reasons to oppose the employment of the quota system, including the persuasive arguments that they simply don't work. A more fundamental objection, however, is that the quotas really solve nothing. Indeed, they create many more problems than they might be expected to resolve. If jobs are scarce, apportioning them to one group on the basis of racial or biological characteristics means denying employment to other individuals because of their race or biological characteristics. But it is no solution to substitute one form of discrimination for another. Two wrongs do not make a right. So this is the guy who literally wrote for MLK saying, hey, Ibram X. Kendi, go f yourself.
Most people that have had any kind of, diverse life socioeconomically or racially, at least many people, and I would share this instinct, have the instinct that the true disadvantage is class and poverty. That is really closer to what we mean when we're talking about privilege and disadvantage than skin color, especially nowadays. So certainly the people that would acknowledge all and lived through all the history that Jamel is talking about and fought it, they actually had my position.
So, Jamel, I want to pick up from that very thought. Given that at the beginning, Coleman talked about, again, several people who were involved in civil rights movements using the word colorblindness, and I know we're having a disagreement about what they intended by that, but using the word colorblindness as a positive, as a value, as something to be worth aiming for. And I think that understanding of it has broad popular appeal. But I want to ask you, is it your contention that those who are asserting colorblindness as a positive value, are they cynically weaponizing the term, or
are they secret racists? That's exactly what he's asking right here.
Are they sincere and perhaps, in your view, misguided?
I think people are sincere. I would not accuse someone of cynically using a term in the absence of any evidence of cynical use of the term. I think they're very sincere. There are a few substantive points that Coleman made that I really think are worth addressing, and that is his continuous avocation of civil rights luminaries, and Dr. King, Bayard Rustin, as somehow advocates for an entirely race-neutral set of policies. Now, we can say for certain that Rustin and King wanted eventually a colorblind society, one in which race had no particular significance on people's lives. And I want that society as well. I think we can all agree on that, or 99% of us. But when it comes...
Well, not if you read CRT. I mean, you were a Marxist earlier, so I don't know if I agree with this, that you actually want this, but okay.
When it came to dealing with the situation of Black Americans in the 60s and the 50s and the 70s for Rustin and for others who survived that decade, I think it is a little disingenuous to suggest that they were absolutely opposed to race-conscious policies, right? King was a social democrat, supported broad-based anti-poverty programs, but in interviews, in a number of speeches, not just in Why We Can't Wait, but in a number of speeches and books, he made clear that he was...
I want to stop you there, Jamel, because I want to go right to that point to Coleman, that in fact, Coleman Jamel is saying that Dr. King and others, while using the term colorblindness as an aspiration, potentially long-term aspiration, that they were not opposed to race-specific solutions and policies. And I'm sure that that Jamel can cite some examples, but it sort of is a challenge to your view, to your claim that they were. I think you're making the case that they would not have wanted anything that would be race-specific. He's saying that's not true.
I'm not sure he can cite examples, actually, but I'm sure that I can. So, for example, Bayard Rustin, who ghost wrote parts of MLK's book, Why We Can't Wait, and organized the famous March on Washington, and was in MLK's inner circle. He wrote to the Wall Street Journal in 1974, when affirmative action was a controversy. He said, quote, The controversy over quotas and preferential treatment did not originate in the agenda of the civil rights movement. The leaders of the civil rights movement, King, Randolph, Wilkins, and others, were explicit in opposing reverse discrimination. They were opposed on philosophical grounds, but were also motivated by pragmatic political considerations.
Wow.
Now, I think it would be convenient for my opponent in this debate if there were analogously explicit quotes of someone like Dr. King or Rustin saying, actually, we're for this, like we're for race-based policy. But I'm not sure that they actually exist.
That's pretty devastating, Sitch. Don't you think?
Oof. Smoke. Well, let's see. Let's see if there's a counter. Okay.
Right. Look, if you're fighting racism, which I do think obviously racism in the 50s and 60s was far more prevalent, coming out and being a big fat racist is probably not the best strategy, right?
Right.
So it seems like they probably couldn't do that.
Well, that's kind of some of the CRT argument is that's why they say like MLK was like secretly against colorblindness or secretly against, secretly in favor of violence or something.
Right.
So in 1987, a writer made the exact argument that Coleman is making now, that Bayard Rustin was a firm opponent of anything that might smack of race preferences, of anything of the sort. And the chairman, one of the chairmen of the A. Philip Randolph Institute, wrote to the New York Times to contest this and say, in fact, that while Rustin was president of the A. Philip Randolph Institute in the 1970s, his exact time period, he was also board chairman of the recruitment and training program designed to rectify underrepresentation of Blacks and other minority groups in the construction and building trades. Before budget cuts during the Reagan era scheduled the program, it placed 18,000 qualified minority group members as apprentices in the building trades nationally. This clarifies, and he goes on to clarify that Rustin was not opposed to race consciousness in public policy. He was opposed to quotas, which he viewed as undemocratic, but he was not opposed to race consciousness. And I would ask Coleman not to equate the two things, right? You can be opposed to quotas, not opposed to race consciousness, because that can take very many different forms when it comes to making public policy. Do we think King and Rustin would be opposed to what is now a policy of targeting for integration, right? Segregated areas? That is race consciousness in public policy. That's addressing particular relationships of domination and subordination. It's not a quota, though. So are we contending that King and Rustin and Randolph would be opposed to targeted integration efforts? I don't think so. And so let's not equate different categories.
He's defining integration as race conscious, giving people equal access to certain goods and services is, I mean, I struggle because so much of this is the framing of it. You can easily frame that as race neutral, right? If you're saying this university shouldn't be off limits to anyone, that's a race neutral policy. But he would turn around and frame it as letting Blacks into this college is a race conscious policy, right?
Yes.
She has the exact same policy, but it's just the framing of it is different.
Yeah, but that's why a lot of this is kind of like this dumb.
Yeah, that's why I just want, what is your position on the actual policies? Because if you're against quotas, look, we got no beef here. Like, why are we even having this debate? Right?
Well, I'm trying to find this article that he's talking about because the quotas article, because I found the thing that he referenced, which is literally just a letter to the editor. Just what a random person is saying.
No way. For real?
Yes.
Weak.
So I'm trying to find the original article that the person was referencing.
Well, I wish you would just ask him straight out. I don't remember if he does. If he's in favor of quotas. Because quotas is where the idea of quotas is you're going to give preferential. It's exactly what was going on in the Harvard case. You're going to give preferential treatment to certain races and different treatment to other races, which is not colorblind, obviously. You're treating people differently based on race. That's the opposite of colorblindness. Some people
Okay.
call that racism.
Right. So I couldn't find the article that was the original, but I did find an article by the person themselves, Bayard Rustin.
Okay.
They said, it's a very long article, so I'm just going to go to like the quota part. While the United States has had no experience with the politics of redistribution similar to that attempted in Britain, we have witnessed the effect of the kinds of policies that seek the exclusive advancement of social groups suffering from past or present discrimination. Moreover, policies that represent an attempt at redistribution through a form of social engineering. The most controversial of these policies is the imposition of racial quotas in the hiring programs of businesses, construction, trade unions, universities, and the like. For the individual who no longer believes economic growth to be an enlightened or feasible approach to the problem of income inequality, quota systems represent an obvious solution. And indeed, were a zero or slow growth economy to obtain, we would no doubt confront increasing demands for some form or another of quota hiring in order to ration the piece of a shrinking pie on a more racially or sexual equal basis.
This guy sounds like a right winger.
I know. This is the guy who ghost wrote for MLK, by the way. There are any number of reasons to oppose the employment of the quota system, including the persuasive arguments that they simply don't work. A more fundamental objection, however, is that the quotas really solve nothing. Indeed, they create many more problems than they might be expected to resolve. If jobs are scarce, apportioning them to one group on the basis of racial or biological characteristics means denying employment to other individuals because of their race or biological characteristics. For some people, such a procedure is entirely acceptable since they are convinced that whites or males have not won their jobs out of the ability or intelligence, but because they are members of a, quote, privileged class.
Wow.
This guy sounds base as fuck. Of course, they are correct to point out that white men have had a disproportionate share of good jobs because of practices and prejudices that have long been rooted in our culture, but it is no solution to the article, even though it's the New York Times, has a lot of like errors in it, so I don't know why. To substitute. There's like missing letters. But it is no solution to substitute one form of discrimination for another. Two wrongs do not make a right, as the quota proponents seem to believe. So this is the guy who literally goes wrote for MLK saying, hey, Ibram X. Kendi, go fuck yourself.
Yeah. That's pretty clear.
Ibram X. Kendi always says the solution to past discrimination is future discrimination.
Right. And this guy's saying, no, that's incorrect.
Incorrect. Okay.
Yeah, you got to destroy the system of racial preferences altogether. Now, what is a good way to do this? Sitch? Is there anything you can think of that might fight against that system?
Obviously, we need to hyperfixate on race.
No, it's color blindness.
Oh, sorry. I got confused for a second. Okay. I really thought we had I, for some reason, thought that hyperfixating on race would solve all of our problems. I don't know why I thought that. Okay, well, let me keep reading. Because guys sound the base as hell. More to the point, what sort of society does the future promise? Should we surrender the single most effective means of dealing with problems of the slum proletariat? This underclass either has no relation to the productions of goods and services or is trapped in marginal dead-end occupations. We may, in fact, be witnessing the emergence of a class of economic untouchables, an entire generation of largely black youth who have been deprived of the opportunity to enter the workforce in a meaningful way, and who, in despair, may simply abandon hope of ever taking part in the economy. To some, the current attack on growth is simply the latest of intellectual fashions. I disagree. Far from being a passing fad, the willingness to abandon growth at once symbolizes and contributes to the weakening of liberal will and the liberal vision in the West. That's interesting. Above all else, liberals have fought for society that offered an ever-increasing possibility for the fulfillment of individual potential within the context of a just, legal, and economic order. Who is this right-winger? Who is this conservative, racist, right-wing person?
This is the guy that he cited that was against colorblindness?
This is the guy that Coleman referenced, that Ghost wrote for MLK. And then he tried to, and then Bowie cited someone who wrote a letter to the editor saying, no, you misunderstood their own words.
Right.
Okay, this is their own word. The failure to achieve perfect justice. This is, oh my God, this guy's so based. This is why all these leftists who say, MLK was the radical Marxist, they're all full of shit. They're all just liars. Listen to this. The failure to achieve perfect justice and perfect opportunity should in no way obscure the very real progress that has been made towards these ideals.
Nice.
This is in 1976, by the way, that this guy wrote this article. Okay. The failure to achieve perfect justice, or the one, not the least of these achievements, is a perpetuation of a democratic form of government that, whatever its flaws, has permitted ordinary people to have a voice in, and sometimes to dominate the political system. It is furthermore a system that has reduced the influence of privilege without coercion or purges. What a liberal. Now we are told that the byword of the future is to be retrenchment, that we will have to make do with less, even though we are assured a future with less will be superior to the present. Better for whom? Not certainly for those who now have little. Not for the citizens of the third world nations who alternate between despondence and desperation. There is still a challenging agenda of worldwide economic advancement ahead, and it is an agenda on which the future of humankind rests, just as surely as our future depends on the protection of air and water. Wow, what a hippie.
This guy is majorly anti-Marxist too. Obviously,
I know.
This sounds like free market economics here.
Totally. To those who insist that we can no longer tolerate economic... Oh, this is hilarious. To those who insist that we can no longer tolerate economic growth, my response is simply that we can.
Wow.
He just took a big dump on leftists, like the far left right there.
Yeah, their whole outlook on growth.
Yeah.
Super black pilled.
So basically,
I don't understand. So
what he said at the end there, which I'd be curious, I have to go back and read the whole article to see what the context of it is. So the article is called "No Growth Has to Mean Less is Less." So it sounds like he's arguing against left-wing environmentalists who are saying we need to stop economic growth to protect the environment. I think that's the context of all this.
right.
So this is the radical Marxist who ghost wrote for MLK.
Right now the left's housing policies and their environmental policies are in total conflict.
Right.
Yeah, no, this is awesome.
Okay.
That was great. Thanks. You got that from the Cato Institute, right?
I got this from the liberal New York Times.
The New York Times.
By Bayard Rustin.
Nice.
Based Bayard. We call him Based Bayard. I like that. Okay. Start it up.
Stories of policies under a single umbrella.
Okay.
The documentary
And just
record
briefly respond to that.
disputes Coleman's claim here.
Yeah, I do want to move on to one more topic, but Coleman, you please take a response to that.
Rustin's position, which is consistent with the, I think, later description by the leader of the A. Philip Randolph Association, was that there should be aggressive outreach to minority and Black candidates, followed by a strict judging by the merit principle. Now, if that's your position, that is far closer to the colorblind position in terms with respect to the merit principle than it is to the current status quo of race conscious policy.
I don't think.
Yeah, that's what I want to know. What is your position on the policy,
Right.
Jamel?
I think that's the case at all. I don't think you can point to it. Quotas have been illegal in the United States for decades now. So you're making a distinction here that doesn't actually exist and sort of subsuming what is actually race conscious policy under this rubric of colorblindness. In which case, yeah, I guess we all agree.
Hold on. He said quotas and preferential treatment in the quote that I said. I would just like to point that out.
All right, I want to go to
Wait,
look, and he doesn't look. The moderator doesn't follow up on that.
follow up. I want to get to the bottom of this because this is the problem is that there's all this hiding in the language. It's well, they didn't mean this, or they didn't mean that. What a surprise that all the people that were actually advocating for, pretty moderate liberal principles that then became laws, they're actually secret Marxists. You just have to read the words in this very specific way to get to the bottom of it.
Right.
And listen, I'm not actually advocating for some radical position. I'm actually advocating for something that's very completely acceptable to everyone. That's why I have to pretend and hide all my language in this very complicated package.
Right, to hide what you're really advocating for.
Right.
But did Jamel say that he agrees he's against quotas in this
That's what he
melee?
said.
Right.
Yeah, but he's not really
Reluctantly, he says, I guess we all agree that quotas suck.
Right. So, but what exactly? What
does race consciousness policies mean if it's not quotas? That's why
okay. He didn't really say he was against quotas. He said quotas were illegal.
Right.
So it doesn't mean he agrees with it.
Let's listen again. I'm back it up 5 seconds.
Okay, go back.
Blindness. In which case, I guess you're making a distinction here that doesn't actually exist and sort of subsuming what is actually race conscious policy under this rubric of colorblindness. In which case, I guess we all agree.
Hold on. He said quotas and preferential treatment in the quote that I said. I would just like to point that out.
all right, I want to go to the most recent very, very public publication and discussion of the issue of colorblindness, which of course goes to the Supreme Court's decision to strike down affirmative action in college admissions. And Justice Thomas wrote a 53-page concurring opinion in which he asserted several times that the Constitution itself is colorblind. He also took issue with some of the liberal justices who Jamel were essentially arguing your position that colorblindness was to make oneself blind to reality. And Justice Thomas responded to one of Justice Jackson's arguments in quite sharp language. He wrote this: individuals are the sum of their unique experiences, challenges, and accomplishments. What matters is not the barriers they face, but how they choose to confront them. And their race is not to blame for everything, good or bad, that happens in their lives. A contrary, myopic worldview based on individual skin color to the total exclusion of their personal choices is nothing short of racial determinism. That's Justice Thomas responding to a point made by Justice Jackson. I want to ask you about this he sort of says it's either or. Either we're in a colorblind world or we're in a world where the argument is based on what he calls a myopic worldview, that individual skin color is the thing that determines everything in their life. Is that a fair dichotomy that he's presenting? And if not, where's the nuance?
Look at this guy. He's just got a huge hard-on for nuance.
I don't think it's a fair dichotomy. I think it's very much a straw man, in part because no one in our conversation or in the conversation among the justices is making the claim that race is the single most determinative thing. Everyone acknowledges, even 150 years ago, right, that exceptional individuals can make their way, that even talented and not quite exceptional individuals can make their way and find success.
This is kind of a dishonest framing again of the situation. So he said no one is saying that race is the single most factor. And I thought he was going to bring up being rich, but he didn't. He said, you can be some kind of superstar individually and still succeed because you're just so awesome. But it's like, well, wait a minute. We were talking about specific factors that apply to groups of people, right? So like race, gender, class, things of that nature. You can't then insert into the conversation some individual factor like you just happen to be based and awesome. So no matter what happens, you can't be held down. Because it's like, sure, I guess, but that doesn't you can't really analyze something from a group perspective like you were trying to do and then say, well, there's always going to be superstars, because that's irrelevant.
Right.
To the conversation. Because from a group perspective, the current crop of leftists do say that race is the most important factor. They do say, well, even if you're rich and black, you still have less privilege in society than a poor white person. I mean, there was like literally in a video, there was that kid who was, it was kind of disgusting. There was that kid who was leading the Mizzou protests in college, who was the son of some, like, I don't know, I think like the second largest, owner of trains in the eastern coast of America, right? It's like some multi-millionaire, if not billionaire, train magnate guy. And this kid is sitting there arguing that, I'm sorry, I'm confusing him with someone else. There was a different kid who was he made a bunch of money on YouTube, and he was talking about buying a house for his mother. Okay.
Oh,
he was rich enough that he could just buy a house for his mother. And he was talking about how, well, even the fact that he's rich enough to just, he's a millionaire and he could just buy a house for his mom, he still had less privilege than a poor white person because he was black. And people were just like, that's really fucking disgusting that you're making this argument.
Right. Because he got some sort of microaggressions from the real estate agents.
Yes, that's right. Yes, exactly. Exactly.
The real estate agents that a poor person would never even be able to talk to.
Yes. And if I recall correctly, it was because he wanted to pay
cash
or upfront or something, which is just a weird, like normally when you're buying a house, that's not the way in which anyone buys a house generally.
No, this is untrue. This is actually, the cash buyers are at a severe advantage over other people that have to get a mortgage because it can close a lot faster when you're dealing a cash deal.
Yeah, but I'm saying, does the average person who's buying a house, they don't show up with a suitcase full of cash?
The cash buyers have an advantage.
You're not answering my question.
Right. But in certain markets, yes, the cash buyers far outnumber the people that go to get a mortgage, which I would classify as the normal people, right?
Right. I would suspect, and I would suspect that that if you're going to say the markets where there's a bunch of people running around with cash to just buy houses are the people that are flipping the houses or are buying them for some kind of B&B. They're not actually living in the houses.
They are, yeah. They're buying them as investment properties.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's why they have a massive amount of cash to just throw at a real estate agent.
Right. And they have an advantage because the real estate agents want to deal with them because they're easier. Sure. They don't, like, you could get in the middle of closing and the bank deny the loan for the person that wants to buy the house. Cash, you don't have to worry about that. You take several variables out of the equation when you are dealing with a cash offer.
Well, it's funny too, because like
king. Yeah.
Right. It's funny too, because the kid that was complaining about this, he looked like he was, I don't know, 21, 22. I don't know how old he was. So you have a kid who's like 21, looks like he's in his 20s, has face piercings. Okay. And he's like, let me just buy this house with cash. Of course, real estate is going to be like, wait, what? Like,
well, I don't.
But no, it's because he's black. Like, if he was white, they'd still be like, I don't know about this. They'd be like, oh, really? Okay.
I don't remember this. So I could be wrong because my memory could have faded.
This was a while ago.
But if he tried to spend paying with cash as a disadvantage, that would offend me to no end.
No. He was trying to spin that, like, the fact that the real estate agent had some suspicion of him was
where the
because
cash came from. Okay.
No, it wasn't really where this cash came from. It was suspicion that, this like young kid with face piercings is just going to have enough cash on hand to outright buy a house.
Right. Yeah.
Right. Which I'm like, well, it's because there's a lot of reasons. It's not because you're black. Like, that's, to the bottom of the list there. If some white kid your same age with face piercings showed up and said, let me just buy this house with cash, I think most real estate agents would be like skeptical.
Right. In LA, if you don't have a bunch of tattoos and face piercings, they're like, where are you going to get the money to pay for this house? You're obviously not a rock star.
Well, there you go. And yeah, exactly. In LA, it might be a little different. So anyway.
The dispute, I suppose, is what do we do about group inequality? And this gets back to my opening statement here, that we can perceive not just individual differences in talent and in will and these sorts of things, but like group inequalities that are tied to a very well-established historical record. And
wait, no one is saying that you can't have any group focus or group inequalities. That's literally why the suggestion is that the that the focus be on class, socioeconomic status, and not race. That's a group. You're saying poor people as a group should have certain economic, assistance from the government, from society. That's a group level thinking and strategy and plan.
The dispute is always over the amount of effort. People want to believe that people get the amount that they deserve for the amount of effort that they put in. But a lot of people on the left feel like you can put an inordinate amount of effort in and get nothing out of it because of racism.
Or some other problem. Yeah. Society unfairness in the world, which I mean is true. Obviously, that can happen.
Sure, it definitely can happen.
Right.
But if you're living under the delusion that it's 100% certain that that's going to happen, and therefore you put zero effort in, then obviously the situation's completely different because you've expended no effort.
Right. I think when you're talking to someone like this and they're hiding their power level, they're trying to be weaselly with the language, maybe a good area to pin them down on would be to try to say, get a definitive answers. Wait a minute. Why can we not just have policies based on socioeconomic status, which would disproportionately help Black people anyway? Why does it have to be based on race specifically? Because then there's really only one of two answers, which is that, well, you give the privilege answer and you give the answer, well, Black people just, I guess, deserve it more because of racism specifically, or you give the CRT answer, which is, well, if you do that, essentially white people will still figure out a way to screw over Black people.
You're right. But it'd be good to know which one they're operating under.
Right. So that would be curious as to where Bowie is. What is he operating under? But you kind of have to get the answer to that question.
Hi, you just listened to a clip from the Sitch and Adams show. If you like what you heard, you can listen to our live show right here on this channel on Sunday, starting at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern. And if you want, you can super chat us. We read $20 and up super chats on the show and then do a follow-up stream on the following Tuesday where we read the rest of the unread super chats and interact with fans of the show. Subscribe to this channel right here to listen to the live show or to listen to more of our awesome clips.